You've had a brief introduction to nodes. Now it's time to have a look at different types of nodes and how you may want to use them. As you now know, the SK node acts like a blueprint for all other nodes, and while it may be invisible, it does exist. It can also have a position. That position can also change. It also must have a parent and can have many children. But what other noteworthy attributes does SK node have? As well as having a position which is in the XY plane, it also has a Z position, which works in the Z plane. Even though we are not working in a 3D landscape, it's still important to be able to control which order the objects on the screen are drawn in. This value is not a measure of pixels, it is simply a case of lowest number to the back and highest number towards the front. You can set the XY scale that affects the size of the node. This isn't particularly useful for a node, but can be very useful for resizing sprites and labels. There is a Z rotation value, where you can use radians to rotate the node around its anchor point. If your node contains other nodes, they will also be rotated around the node. You can change the node's alpha channel for transparency, which once again is only really useful for visual assets such as sprites and labels. That's all you really need to know about SK node for now. As mentioned earlier, it is often used as a foundation for other nodes, so everything you've just learned will also apply to everything you're about to learn. Let's dive into sprite nodes next, as they are a first-class citizen of SpriteKit. Every time you want an image to appear on the screen, you'll be using a SK sprite node. So what exactly does SK sprite node add to its blueprint? You now have a size property that affects the size of the bounding box that your sprite must fit within. You can now also change the anchor point. It no longer has to be attached to the location of the node. So you can pick exactly where you want the object to be tethered. It can be within the bounds of the object, or outside of the bounds, wherever you want it. You may think that the anchor point isn't that important if you're just going to move your objects around, but it's important to note that scaling is affected by the anchor point location, and so is rotation. So putting your anchor point in the wrong location can create nightmares for you later on. Each sprite also has a texture property that you can assign an image to it. The format of the texture is SK texture. Don't get scared if you have never heard of this format before. You can still use your PNG files, but SpriteKit has to instantiate them in an SK texture object, and this isn't difficult at all. It can be done with one line of code. There are also a bunch of properties that affect lighting as of iOS 8. We will cover these in a later lesson, as this is quite a big subject. Before talking about more types of nodes, let's have a look at how SK nodes and SK sprite nodes work in action.